you. And I see lots of people I know on here, so thank you for your support. I see actually one of my adoptive brothers is on here, so hi Jonathan, and actually my one of my biological sisters. So hi Sissy, good to see you guys. Thank you. Glad to be here. I have a short presentation for you that I again titled "Becoming Black," and so we're going to go through the presentation, and then after the presentation, I am open for questions and feel free to put questions in the chat box as we go along. And I think that Marcy and Pam will collect those questions in a way and make sure that we address them at the end. But I'm excited to get started. So I will share my screen and give me a second. I'm also a college professor on the side. So I'm used to kind of doing the Zoom thing. So give me a second to get all set up and make sure that everyone can see my presentation. Can you give me like a head nod if you can see it? All right, we're good. So let's get started. And I am going to move this over here so I can't see you all for while I'm presenting, but so give me just a second. All right, moving you guys over there. Okay. So when I tell people who don't know me that my talk is called Becoming Black, they look at me strangely. And I know they're thinking what you may be thinking, becoming Black. I'm pretty sure you were born Black. And that's fair because I was, originally at least. See, originally I was conceived by two Black people, but then something happened that completely changed my Blackness trajectory. And yes, that is a thing. I have to warn you though, losing my Blackness is not as exciting as Michael Jackson's skin bleaching or a Lifetime movie baby swapping. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1971 to a single mother with a 3-year-old son. For reasons I may never know, she gave me up for adoption and went off to raise my son. I'm sorry, my brother, her son. So I was adopted. My adoptive parents had 3 biological kids, a boy, a girl, and another boy, all about 3 years apart. But when they had their youngest son, they were told they couldn't safely have any more kids. Both of my parents were the oldest of 6, and they wanted more kids, so they decided to adopt. My mom repeatedly told me this story about getting a call from the agency that there was a baby who needed a home. But before they agreed to adopt me, they needed to come and see me. It was about a 30-minute drive, so my parents spent that time discussing all of the things they could or couldn't handle from a baby. What if I had Down syndrome? What if I was missing a limb? What if I was blind, deaf? What else would they need to see me for before? When they arrived at the agency and laid their eyes on a healthy baby, that's all they saw. It didn't matter that I was Black and they were white or that it was 1971. They got their 4th baby and they were thrilled. The agency told them they had to wait 24 hours to let it sink in, process it. That's all the preparation and training they received when considering adopting a Black child in 1971. My mom told them that she wasn't leaving without me, so it was going to be a super long night for them. And after realizing that the crazy lady really wasn't going to leave, they let her take me home, and my adoption was official 1 year later. My mother believed that as an infant, I was a blank slate on which she could impress our family's values, cultures, and way of thinking. She didn't consider if the outside world would or wouldn't accept me. She did not think about how I would see myself. She fully believed that if she raised me, I would be no different than her white biological children. This meant that she didn't prepare for the physiological and societal differences that she would face raising a Black child. In recent conversations with my siblings and my dad, I was finally told the truth about my adoption, that my mom was proud to take the family interracial. Specifically, my dad recalls that our first thought of interracial adoption came about because all the publicity then about Americans in Vietnam fathering children who then had no fathers. But I think we were discouraged then too because of the complexity of the process. I think it was the cost of the process. We didn't really do anything about it in the year in Rhode Island, but came back to the idea in our first day in Columbia, Maryland. We were quite taken up with the idealism of the new city and its ideals of integration. I don't exactly recall how we were given the idea of adopting a Black child. I do know that we were told a white child may take years to find, but a Black child could be found quite soon. So we pursued that, not because we were eager to integrate, but because we wanted another child soonest. Did we give any thought that this would require any special preparation? No. Did we seek any? No. Were we offered any? I don't think so. So far as I can recall, we only thought of the differences in a Black child's hair as being a problem. Naturally, we asked our own kids and our own they thought of the idea, but there was no effort to dissuade us or to advise us to get prepared. It would not be inaccurate to say that we were naive and unprepared. And so they wrote a check to the clerk of City Circuit Court number 2 for $30, and I was theirs. And that's how my Black identity was lost. My dad was a college professor who only wanted to teach, not research and publish. So every 3 to 5 years, when tenure considerations were made, my dad would find a job and we would move. My mom was a private school English teacher, and the 4 of us attended the elite schools where she taught for free. In 1977, my dad accepted a position at the American University in Cairo, and we moved to Egypt. And from 1st to 3rd grade, I attended the private international school where my mom taught. And I developed a strong identity as an American. So strong that I remember being really angry when our family had to go to Europe every summer instead of back to the US because flights were so much cheaper. I don't remember identifying with our Nubian cook and maids, but I do remember being pulled off a tour bus by locals once because they thought I was a stowaway. Yet I never remember identifying as Black. We were American, and that was that. So when I look at this picture, look at these photos and see me just excited by the white doll as I was by the Black doll, I recognize that my parents did attempt to instill a love of my skin color in me. And I say my skin color because they didn't provide me with racial mirrors or any Black culture. I was being raised as a white kid who happened to have brown skin. Brown skin that apparently didn't need lotion and hair that clearly didn't need oil and was perfectly fine when I swam every day and washed it literally every night. And yes, my mom, my white mom, thought that this was a perfectly acceptable look for picture day. In 1980, we returned to the US. My dad was teaching at the University of Miami, and my mom was again at an elite prep school where we attended. Our first neighborhood in Miami was very diverse. Although I didn't go to school with the kids in my neighborhood, I rode bikes and swam with them every day. And even though my 4th grade class looked like this, and although my mom had told me that I was different from the Black kids in my neighborhood, I began to identify as Black. But I realized that my Black was different from the friends in my neighborhood. I had Black skin, Black features, but no Black culture. I could sing just about any Beatles song word for word, and I still can. But I hadn't heard of the Jackson 5. But once I learned that there was a whole world of Blackness that I had not been exposed to, I became determined to find a way to access it. It was in 7th grade when I learned that my hair and my skin were different and needed different beauty products. I learned to use lotion every day. I learned to not wash my hair every day. I learned that my hair needed oil to be healthy and strong. I learned that relaxers made my hair straight. I learned all of these things because I taught them to myself. MTV and then later BET were my models for how a Black girl should style herself. I traded in my blue and lavender eyeshadows. Yes, I do have pictures, but I'm not showing them. For Black eyeliner and Dark and Lovely. I fell in love with R&B and still have all my albums. I fell in love with New Edition and Michael Jackson, and my first concert was the Victory Tour at the Orange Bowl in Miami. I learned about Miami sound, and because my parents didn't know to tell me not to, I listened to 2 Live Crew and Ice-T. I learned to dance in a way that none of my white friends could. I began to identify in a way that separated me from everyone that I knew. 7th grade changed me, and I began to feel very different from my friends. It was in 7th grade when I first heard that I was pretty for a Black girl. It was in 7th grade when it was pinpointed out to me that my hair didn't fall like the other girls, and my thighs were so much more muscular, so muscular that I couldn't surely borrow their jeans. It was in 7th grade when I realized that if I actually wanted to dance with a boy at a school dance, I had to bring said boy as a guest because none of the boys in 7th grade, not a single one, was African American. It was in 7th grade when I realized that I was Black and that no amount of nurture, no amount of privilege, and no amount of education could change that extremely visible fact. It was in 7th grade that I was invited to swim at one of my best friend's country club pools. I was so excited. I had been to country clubs before during my friends' birthday parties and bat mitzvahs, but I had never been there on a random weekend to swim and order food poolside. The night before the pool date, my mom received a call from my friend's mom uninviting me. She found out that Blacks were not allowed as guests at the club. My mom sat me down and explained this to me, but she added that from here on, my friend was allowed at our house anytime, but that I would no longer be allowed to go to her house as long as her parents were okay belonging to a club that discriminated. That was my first real introduction to blatant racism and discrimination. We moved to a suburb of Baltimore, Maryland in 1985, and I chose to go to public school so that I could be around Black kids. I began hanging out at my Black friends' houses more than my own because there I felt more like me. And I began code switching, putting on my professional voice, my phone voice, at my own house. My best friend that year was a white girl who only hung around Black kids. And in less than a year, I went from celebrating at bat mitzvahs to wearing a kango. And yet we called ourselves opposite twins. But that was also the year I learned about systemic racism in schools. On my first day of school, my mom, armed with entitlement and privilege, marched me in and demanded that I be registered in all advanced classes. I had come from a rigorous private school with 2 years of Latin and French, high school math, and more. It was the right academic fit, but after my first day, I knew that it wouldn't serve me well socially. As it turned out, I was the only Black girl in every class except choir and PE. There was one other girl in my grade in advanced classes, but unfortunately, she was not in any of my classes. How could it be that in a school of more than 25% African Americans, that not more of us could handle advanced classes? I spent a year in honors history being asked by the teacher if I wouldn't be more comfortable in general science, even though I had a consistent B in the class. I spent a year, like all the other years in the past, feeling the heat of my classmates' eyes on me when the history teacher began the unit on slavery or civil rights or anything Black. I had one set of friends in class and another at lunch after school and on the weekend. I immersed myself in Black identity outside of the classroom. Then we moved to Columbia, Maryland, the planned community we lived in when I was adopted. I had only Black friends at that time and hung out at Black clubs. I had developed my own Black identity in the midst of my white family. It was 1989, my senior year in high school, when my mom must have felt like she had lost me. In a fight about a boy I was dating, my mom told me that when she originally adopted me, she believed in nurture over nature, but now she realized that she was wrong. All I remember is thinking to myself, did she just tell me that she thought she could love the Black off of me? Yep, she kind of did. I went away to college the next year and double majored in sociology and African American history. I pledged the first and the finest Black sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. 1 year prior to that, I began my adoption reunion search. Because my adoption was closed, I began my reunion search by requesting and receiving non-identifying information. Non-identifying information is kind of a cruel joke. It's a narrative report pulled from an adoptee's actual adoption and birth records. It gives you just enough information to want more, but not enough information to answer your burning questions. Your birth mother was an attractive, mature, articulate, intelligent person. She stated at 5'4", weighing 125 pounds and having a medium brown complexion with dark, slightly curling hair. At the time of your birth, she was 23 years old and of the Protestant faith. At the time of your birth mother had a 4-year-old son. He was not aware of your existence. Your birth father was described by your birth mother as being a sophisticated, intelligent, and very self-assured person. He stood 5'9" tall and weighed 190 pounds. At the time of your birth, he was 29 years old. Your birth father was not aware of your mother's pregnancy or of her plans for adoption. Initially, that narrative is life. It's a window to the unknown. I imagine it being like an addict's first hit. I chased that feeling for more than 20 years trying to get another fix, another bit of information. Over the 2 hopeless decades of searching, I learned that my birth mother wanted me to stay a secret, as she refused multiple attempts by the agency to reunify us. I also learned that finding my father was probably never going to happen because birth mothers often lie. She did. He was 36, not 29. I also learned that the non-identifying information is often altered to make to make it harder to do your own search. It was, my brother was 3, not 4. I also learned that I had no legal right to any of my biological information. We often talk about privilege. Biological privilege means that your birth records, your original birth certificate, your culture and religion of origin, your language of origin, your ability to know who you are and where you came from is a birthright. For adoptees, most, if not all, of that information is not yours and you have no right to it. That realization fills your heart with a deep sense of loss and victimization. I see these savior types on Facebook with their adoption rocks tags and their gotcha day celebrations, and I kind of want to vomit. I get angry for me and my experience and sad for the kiddo in the post and his or her impending pain. The truth is that adoption is loss. But in 2017, through an at-home DNA kit that led to Facebook connections, awkward conversations, and mailing my possible sister a DNA test, I found my paternal family and all 7, yes, 7 of my dad's children, my older siblings. I learned that my dad died in 1996, 3 years after I initially started my search, never knowing that I had been conceived. I also used the internet, Facebook, and another DNA kit to find my brother, the brother in my non-identifying information that I had longed to find since 1993. In August of 2017, I traveled to Baltimore and reunited with the family that I didn't know I had. It was full circle. I had become fully Black with siblings that matched me. But my foundation is built as much on classic rock as it is on R&B. And my kiddos who look like me all feel comfortable in their own skin and understand that you can be Black and go to college on a swimming scholarship. You can be Black and play Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven on the ukulele. You can be Black and date people who aren't Black, and you can be Black and love Billie Eilish more than anything else in the whole entire world. And since becoming Black, I became a teacher at predominantly white and affluent schools. My goal was to be the racial mirror for kids like me who sat in classrooms with people who did not look like them. I represented these private schools as their diversity coordinator, attempting to create diverse and accepting environments for all kids. And I received a PhD and focused my dissertation on the experiences of Black teachers at the type of schools where I had once taught. I focused on their professional Black identity development, their experiences of tokenism, and the coping strategies they employed to make it through each day. And I opened a charter school and hired a diverse staff that actually reflected the actual students in our building. I started my own consulting company that focuses on supporting aspiring charter school founders of color who focus on diversity, equity, access, and rigor. And now I find myself a year away from becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist so that I can help transracial adoptees like me become who they were meant to be, with the support and guidance that I didn't have when I was becoming Black. My path was messy and full of obstacles, but it made me the woman I am today. It made me a woman on a mission to use my journey and my healing to help guide others on their journey to an emotionally balanced life, a life in which they embrace their own identities and live authentically and purposely. Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Who has the first question for Dr. Abby? Who's going to jump in?
I have a question. Hi, Abby. Of course, I have a question, right? Surprise, surprise. Oh my goodness, it's so good to see you, and what an amazing, powerful presentation. I guess my question has to do with the fact that you have some biological or one biological sibling that has attended this, correct?
Yeah, I think Sissy's on, yes.
Yeah. And so navigating that piece of it, like, I have a sibling who stayed with my birth family, right? And so, navigating the emotions and feelings of what that sibling is feeling, in addition to exploring my own racial identity, has been something that's been really challenging. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or ideas about that experience.
So I'd love for Sissy to answer if she feels comfortable, but for me, I mean, they were just open and willing. I think it wasn't quite a shock or surprise from who my biological dad was, who Ike was. I don't think they were shocked that I was out there. So that was really helpful. But they were just open and willing and loving. Sissy was kind of the gatekeeper. She was the first one that I found. And she did a DNA test. And then as soon as we realized that, yes, this was true, she just kind of opened the floodgates. I will say that at first it was overwhelming. It was kind of like I wanted to find all of these people, but then, oh my gosh, I found all of these people. And that was overwhelming at first, but we did something really helpful. We used the app Glide, which is like, I don't know, all of those apps where you can leave a video and talk to someone, like Marco Polo. And so we used the app Glide to leave each other messages, which meant then that I could leave one message as opposed to like 7 messages. And so I could say what I needed to say once and they could all see it and respond. It also meant that I could respond when I was in a headspace to do that and not feel like I have to respond because someone's calling or texting. And that was that. I think that made all of the difference to let us all do it on our own pace.
Mm-hmm.
Morgan said that was an amazing presentation. She loved it.
So, hi everyone. I would like to speak. I'm not exactly sure what your question was because my internet service was kind of acting crazy. So, could you direct the question again?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, and
Hi.
I appreciate that you're willing to unmute yourself. So I guess my question is I think about like how my sister, who was raised by our birth mother, what her perception or what her take and her experience it is for her, seeing some of the similarities that Abby's gone through as far as her racial identity and the struggles that she's had. And I had those, but my sister is there's a language barrier as well, but just my sister is really struggling with having some understanding that, and she's embracing me and all of that. But I'm just wondering what that experience is like for you to hear your sister say all of the things that she said about her racial identity.
I'm so amazed at Abby. I mean, Abby is awesome. She's gone through so much. And what I really appreciate is the fact that Abby, her perseverance, her desire to know where she came from. I can't imagine going through life and not knowing who my parents are. I just felt bad that she didn't get to meet my father. But I think as a family, we embraced her because growing up, I went to private school. I went to an all-white school, so I could identify with her because my mom decided I needed to go to a white school. And I remember the times when I felt out of place. I remember some of the things that she said. People looking at you, what's going to come off? Can I touch you? And the girls who wanted their hair like mine, or so I can identify with her because I did go through some of the experiences. But what amazes me so much is that Abby persevered. I mean, I'm just amazed that who she is. I'm just proud of her.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Abby, you have a lot of comments here of everyone congratulating you on your presentation, that it was amazing, inspirational, love the pictures. You've got a lot of nice compliments coming in. Okay.
So I see the question from my niece, Sophie, asking what questions I was eager to ask. So I don't know that I asked as many questions as you would expect. For one, my sissy specifically, but my siblings gave me so much information to kind of introduce me to my dad, which was amazing. And so I got a view of him through their eyes. So I didn't have to ask a lot of questions. The one question that I've always wanted to ask, but I won't probably ever get the answer to it, is I always wondered what my mother wanted to name me because I never really felt connected to my name. And so I've always wondered what she wanted to name me, but she has not wanted to have any connection with me. She feels like I think though her words were, I exposed her secret. So I don't think I'll ever get that one question answered.
Thank you. I was just wondering.
I have a question.
Sure.
So do you feel that your journey has ended in terms of the journey into Blackness, or do you feel it's continuing?
I think that it probably, I mean, just my journey as a all of my these change and alter and shift all the time. I'm very content and very, I don't know, secure in my Blackness, I guess, in my Black identity for sure. So I don't think I can get more set in that, but I think that my views on things often change just because life changes, the world changes. So I don't think my journey ever will end, but I definitely am very secure in being a Black woman. And so I see in the chat, did I meet with any resistance or a lack of understanding of my experience from the Black community once I made a connection? So I remember, especially when we lived in the suburb of Baltimore, feeling different. I remember being called Oreo, being called rich girl, being called lots of things. And I remember being upset about it at the time, but looking back now, I don't think it was any different than calling a tall guy Stretch or calling, they were my friends. I was invited to every party. I hung out with them every weekend. And I think that's just kind of it was my difference. And that was the thing that made me different. I never felt like it was, well, looking back, I recognize that it wasn't a negative thing. So it wasn't exactly resistance, but it was just something that made me different. So I don't really feel like I've had much resistance at all from the Black community at all. Yeah.
What do you feel like it'll be useful, like right now, for any one of us encountering the younger generation right now that would be helpful into helping with their identity or helping us to understand what they may be going through?
So I think that even just that last question, I think that often transracial adoptees feel uncomfortable going back into their community. I think that they often feel that there's going to be resistance, that they're not going to be understood and accepted. And I think that breaking that fear is probably the most important thing when coming into your own identity, is really understanding that that is a fear. And it's until someone tells me that I'm not welcome, I'm just going to assume I'm welcome. And I think that is a hard place to be for a lot of people, and especially adolescents. I don't know why it was easier for me as an adolescent to just decide that I was going to put myself in this space and people were going to accept me. I think some of it had to do with my adoptive mom and the fact that she called out racism where it was and told me that basically that anyone who had these kind of feelings they just weren't intelligent people and that I should ignore them. So I think that I went into life kind of feeling like some people are stupid and they're not going to like me and that's on them and that's not on me. And I just put myself in that situation. So I think that really just helping younger adoptees of all kind just be really confident in who they are as people and not worry about what other people have to say or what they're thinking until they tell you that they're thinking or saying that.
Wow, that's awesome. But do you think that your adoptive mother though laid the groundwork, by her attitude?
So yes and no. I think she absolutely did in the way that she helped me face other people's discrimination. But there are definite times, like I said in my speech, where she basically told me she believed in nurture over nature until I started acting Black. So there are definite times, I have lots of stories about where I was like, I think she may be a little racist herself and not even realize it. So yes, she definitely laid some of the framework, but at the same time, she wasn't perfect at all. She isn't perfect at all.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
There's a question. Do you have similar interest as your biological relatives? Are there
Yes.
PhDs in there too?
Yeah, so definitely. It was great meeting. So I have a niece who is a teacher, and it was great. We still connect on education topics. So yes, I don't know that I've gotten enough time with them. I'm in San Antonio now, and most of them are in Maryland. So I haven't gotten enough time, and especially with the pandemic, I have not been able to go back. But yes, for sure, you can find common ground with anyone. I feel
Right.
like, yeah, as long as you're looking for it, it's there.
Yeah. Here's another question. With your experience at this point in time, what are your thoughts on adoption and specifically transracial adoption?
So a tough question, and one that will kind of let me, I guess, or make me tell a little bit more about my story. So I think that transracial adoption can be done well if there's enough information, enough therapy, enough guidance, if the family is willing to immerse themselves in their adoptees culture and live in neighborhoods that aren't isolating. I think that it can be done. My thoughts about adoption, I wish there was an adoption. I often wonder if my biological dad, if Ike had known that I was going to be born, if things would have been much different. I'm fairly certain that he would have taken me. And so that I have very, I don't know, ambivalent feelings about adoption. And then part of my story that I haven't told, that I didn't tell in the presentation, is that when I was 17 years old, I had a baby who I gave up for adoption. And we reunited in 2011. And what I feel about adoption is that although my parents told me that they would support whatever decision I made, there was never a plan laid out for me other than adoption. So it was, if you want to keep him, that's fine, but you're 17, you want to go to college, you want all of these things, how is that going to happen? Or you can have a family who's ready to have them, take them. And so I honestly feel like, had there been a plan where they said, this is how you can keep him and this is how you can still chase your dreams, that I would not have given him up. So my feelings about adoption are that a lot of reform needs to happen. I think that people really are looking for babies, and they're not looking to make sure that parents get to keep their babies no matter what. I recently saw a story about a homeless woman with an infant sleeping in a tent somewhere in Houston, I think it was, and they took the baby from her. And so now you're paying a foster parent to watch this child instead of paying this mother to keep her child.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's my feeling about adoption.
Yeah, I wonder what the statistics are of well, obviously female, but adoptees that go on to get pregnant and then relinquish. I'd like to know what that is. I mean, I wonder, because I got pregnant in high school. I ended up miscarrying, but that could have been me. I mean, and I think it happens to quite a few of us, so that, I mean, that's got to happen a lot. And I think there was a percentage out there at some point, but I never hear that anymore. And I think that probably happens quite a lot, for whatever reason, but yeah, I mean, I think that's got to be up there. And like you said, removing a child from its mother, why are you paying a foster parent when you've got the mother right there? Why are we doing that? But anyway, we can get into another discussion later. We can just roll on about that. But yeah, I just think that's crazy. But yeah. So, yeah. Anybody else have a question? Oh, Jennifer, do you want to ask the question, Jennifer? Do you want to take yourself off mute? You want me to ask it?
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Hey.
So, yeah, Abby, that was a really fantastic presentation. And my second question is, how have you processed your feelings about not having had any Muraling throughout your childhood?
Good question.
So I don't want to say that I had none. I went out and got my own. I definitely had none until probably middle school. And then again in high school, I had no teachers of color at all throughout all 4 years of high school. My first teacher of color was in college, but I found friends and friends' parents and really kind of went out of my way to find my own racial mirrors. And it started definitely when I was in middle school and started dating my first boyfriend, and spending a lot of time with his family and with his mom, and just kind of, so I think that, how have I processed it? I think that I was too young when I didn't have any to really even kind of process that. As soon as I became an adolescent and started looking for them on my own, I found them. Had I not, I think it would have been a much bigger issue. So yeah, it's kind of one of those questions when people ask you, like, what is it like to be adopted? And you're like, I don't know, because I don't know what it's not like to be adopted. I don't know how I processed it, because I just kind of did. I do think that it was easier for me when I was in elementary and middle school, because my mom taught at the schools where I attended. There was never a big deal about me being adopted, because everyone just knew. My mom was there, my brothers and sisters went to the school, so there was never like a revelation or like someone coming over and, oh, you're adopted. I didn't have that until high school. So I think that my identity as a Black girl was more solidified before my identity as adoptee, because I really didn't become an adoptee until high school, because before that, like, just everyone knew. It wasn't something that was talked about or surprised, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Tina's next.
Yeah, Tina, yeah.
Tina, you want to take yourself off mute?
So my neighbors are lighting fireworks, so I'm going to try and ask really quickly. I'm just wondering, with your family, how they've been. I've just often wondered, a lot of your story is very similar to mine, how my kids feel about having a mom that's adopted, right? It's the only experience I know that they know. And I'm just wondering, with your personal experience, how your kids have been, how your husband has been, supportive, or just if they've had any input or concern over you, I guess, in the process.
So Charles, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, take that one.
My
husband.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm proud of her. Amazed by her. When she went through the process of finding her family, it was insane. The stuff she was able to figure out from little tiny tidbits, and watching her play detective was just kind of fun to see how she managed to put all this information together, and knowing how long it had taken her to do so. It was kind of amazing to see her finally getting those pieces put together, and then seeing her find her family, find her brothers and sisters, work through that process. So I'm glad she was able to fill some of those gaps and learn the things she learned, and it was a pleasure to meet her family. So yeah, I'm happy she's happy.
Tell them about
Thank
the
you.
first time you realized I was adopted.
Oh yeah, that's a funny story. So as we started dating, Abby hadn't mentioned any of this, and so we had gone out on a date, and I think we were going to meet her father for something, to pick something up. I can't remember what it was. And so we pull into this parking lot, and she says, "Oh, there's my dad." Now, What she didn't say, in addition to being a transracial adoptee, she was much younger than her siblings. And so as I'm driving in the parking lot, I'm looking around and all I see is this really old white man. And so I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm thinking, where is she talking about? I don't see her dad. And so finally, as we started getting closer and she's telling me to park, I realized, whoa, the really old white guy is her dad. So that's how I found out she was adopted.
It was a test. He passed.
Thank you.
Now, I just got to jump in here. So Abby, why didn't you tell him that you were adopted?
So our relationship moved really quickly. And so I didn't tell people just because there are just certain things that people just don't really need to know. And by the time it was like, all right, you're going to meet my parents, it was just like, okay, let's just jump in and see how he reacts. And honestly, like, I really wanted to see how he reacts because I've had some strange reactions. I remember there was one guy I dated in college who knew my dad taught at the university where we were working, and we went to go meet my dad in his office. And this guy knew he was going to be this white man. He knew my dad taught there, and in his nerves or whatever, he walks into my dad's office at the university and goes up to my dad and says, "Dr. Maduro, what's up, Pops?" And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know what to do with this. So it was often like funny just to let people find out on their own and kind of see how they reacted, and then kind of decide from there, like, are we going to get a second date? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, that's kind of how my experience was as well. I would often wonder, why would I have date after date or really like this person and never mention it? And then, yeah, like I never made it a priority, and I always wondered why not.
Yeah.
I have another question, and it's about institutional racism, and so I'm really wanting to have more and more conversations about where are the birth mothers of color in these conversations. There's so few, and I understand it, and I also am trying to figure out how we create space for that and how we create invitations or platforms. And we all know that none of us would be here if it wasn't for the platforms that were built for us, right? And so I'm curious as to, I know that historically ACC, this group, lots of groups that have focused on research and reunion have been primarily white first and birth mothers, the baby scoop era, and the girls that went away. You look at the cover of that book. I actually have printed it because it's a sea of white women, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Just that.
Yeah, I know that's a rough one for me. I think that there is sort of a sense of shame around it. I definitely think that there is a sense of shame for women of color who then have had their kids raised by Caucasian families. There's kind of a sense of just shame and realizing kind of the identity at a loss that happens that they didn't think about when they did it. I think that there's just, I don't know. And even speaking from my own birth mother, she sent me one letter that it was full of kind of venom. And all I could think of was like the embarrassment and shame she must feel. Yeah, I don't know. That's all I have for that. I really don't know. I think that it is just hard. It's hard.
I think in American Baby, the book that we're going to be speaking with the author on Monday evening, I read that the majority of Black women kept their babies or a family member. So that percentage of women, like we're saying, it was all shame. And maybe, obviously that's why your birth mother is still reluctant to pursue this relationship. but I've read that in the book, and it was talking about that the statistics show that most women of color either kept their babies or someone in the family did, that that smaller percentage. Yeah.
I would like to just push back on that just a little bit, because we also know that the rate of Black and brown women who have their children removed by the child welfare system is at a much higher rate. And so yes, and I think that there is that, but I also, the institutional racism that has gotten us to where we have a law like MIPA, the Multi-Ethnic Placement Act, that is ridiculous, that exists because we had too many brown and Black babies in the foster care system. And so, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but as a Black woman and as also a first and birth mother, I just really appreciate your feedback on that.
Thank you.
I was also saying too that I wanted to push back on that a little bit too, because there's always the perception within the adoption community that Black people, number one, either did not relinquish, or two, do not adopt. And so that is also kind of a misconception that is out there. And I want to say that I kind of put in the chat for my situation. My mother, we were 4 years in reunion before she passed recently. And she was still, even though at first we were she was also like resistant, and it took her a while to start, she said it was because I was persistent that she finally agreed to meet. And so then even during our relationship, her processing then the grief, the shame, and all those ancient emotions from 50 years post was something that came up fresh for her as we started our reunion. Thankfully, she did process even while we were doing that, but that can also be a very difficult issue that expands beyond the color too, but definitely structural racism on top of everything else that you could possibly have emotions about weighs pretty heavily on Black women.
Yeah, I'm looking in the chat right now and wanted to answer a question. Let's see. Susan asked which identity sits more pronounced, adoptee versus being a first mom. I think that definitely adoptee sits more pronounced, and probably because while I am a first mom, I don't think I've ever really referred to myself as that. When I found Trevor in 2010, maybe it was, I think it was 2010. He was my kid, and I never thought of him as like anything other than my kid, even though he was 20 something at that time. And so I've never thought of myself as his birth mother, but just his mom. He just happens to have more than one mom. So definitely with the adoptee identity sits definitely more pronounced, although even that isn't hugely pronounced. I think that my first identity is always going to be as a Black woman. Any other questions?
Oh, thanks for saying that you were his mom. That was a very big surprise for me, hearing that from my birth mother too. That because I think a perception for adoptees is that, birth parents were able to just walk away and forget that everything ever happened, which is kind of interesting that as I had my own children, I can never imagine not forgetting that I went through all of the things that I went through in giving birth to them and afterwards. Yet that was in my head, that she was able to just walk away and live her life, like they said in those adoption, the adoption rhetoric. And it wasn't true at all. So one of the first things she said was, that I was always your mother, you know, or so thank you for saying that and acknowledging that.
Yeah, he's my kid. The really cool thing about it too is that when we found him in 2010, my youngest daughter was, I think, 4 or 5 years old. And so she has never known a life without him as her brother. And it's interesting, she's 14 now, and she'll say stuff about like him growing up with us and why doesn't he do this? And I'm like, yeah, he didn't grow up with us. And she completely forgets because she just, all she knows is of him as her brother. So yeah.
Sharon says, thanks for an awesome presentation. Lynn said her birth mom thanked her adoptive mom for taking care of her little girl.
I didn't do that. So when I met his adoptive mom, I was actually a little bit jealous. She sent me a huge pack full of pictures of him from growing up until then. And it was hard for me to even look at it. I was a little jealous of her. She thanked me for him, but I did not, and I still have not to this day thanked her, because honestly, I am a little jealous that she got to raise him, because again, I don't feel like I had another option set aside for me. So maybe I'm a little petty. I don't know. I'll own it, but hopefully one day I'll get over it and be able to thank her. But I just have not been able to do that yet.
I want to pick up on that. My son's adoptive mother sent a shoebox full of pictures, starting from, I think, the day she got him or shortly thereafter. And if he had taken a knife and plunged it into my stomach, I don't think I could have been in more agony. So I don't think you're being petty at all. I think you're being a human being.
Yeah, it was difficult.
So if I could just add to that as well, that my family, I was the youngest of 5, and I'm a brown person basically in a white family. And my biological mother will not reunite with me. And I feel like a lot of that is probably her trauma, and that she's just not able to. And I respect it. It's very hurtful. But I have had some connections with her sister, my aunt, and my cousin. And so in that, I'm just trying to extend grace to her, because I can't imagine that part of her. So I guess this is more of an observation, that in your story that you're sharing, I see in your experience something different, that, and maybe it's generational now, that birth mothers, it's still a trauma, but it's a trauma that you seem to be open to the relationships. And I feel like that is all the difference. And that's for each of us, I guess, to try and be open to the relationship. And if it's not the person's time, and if they're not ready, we have no control over that. So thank you for sharing so much of your story, because I have no words for that. So, but thank you.
You're welcome. I kind of feel like secrets had enough of a role in my life, just being adopted, and I don't believe in keeping secrets at this point. Like I'm kind of an open book, because I've seen what secrets can do to people. I see what it's done to my biological mom for sure. And I think that part of the reason why she is not interested in meeting me, and even though I've met my brother, her son, and we have a relationship, part of the reason, honestly, is because she was married to a state senator. And I think she was afraid of some of that shame and just being kind of exposed for other things. And I feel sorry for her. When I got the really harsh letter that she wrote me, basically saying she would never want to meet me, I allowed myself to be sad for 3 days. And I did 3 days, and this may sound insane, but this is me. This is my process. But one day was because she had me, and I appreciate that. One day because she had my brother, and I appreciate that, my connection with him. And the third day was just for her own pain. And after 3 days, I kind of just let it go. Like that's her pain now to process, and I've let it go. And I feel sad for her because she doesn't get to know my amazing kids, really, more than anything else. But if she were to come back around, I'd be open to it as well. Oh, thank you, Lynn.
You know, Barbara mentioned secrets are poison.
Yes.
Also a breeding ground for shame, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Anne made a comment. How did I miss that? And Anne says her first mom still has so much pain, regret, and grief almost 3 years into reunion. Every time I talk to her, she apologizes for not keeping me. It's so sad to see that impact losing me has had on her life.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. And I hope she gets to a place where she realized that she did what she needed to do in the moment. I can look at myself now and say, like, I'm a great mom and I could have raised him. But at the moment, I was like 17 years old and I would not have been a great mom. I was dealing with my own trauma at that point as well. And so all I can do is say that I did in that moment what I thought was my option, my only option, the best option for him and the best option for me. And then just kind of have to let that go. And I hope she gets to a place where she can forgive herself that's in that same way.
I'm glad you said that too, Abby, because that's the thing, that you make the best decision that, based on what based on the information that you have at the time. And that's helped me to process my own, the times where, you make a mistake or you think you made a mistake, or wow, you have so much regret. But then the thing is, you just do what you had, access to, which is kind of like right now, if everything was the way that it was, as far as information that we know now, there would have been a whole lot of different decisions that would have been made. So, yeah.
That's so true. Yeah. So true.
Well, Abby, you've just been an awesome guest this evening.
Yes,
We
you have.
enjoyed your presentation, was great, and we love the pictures. We've had good engagement and dialogue.
Yeah.
Would you like to share how, with everyone that was on tonight, how they could contact you personally on social media?
Yeah, actually, I will do that. I actually have a slide that has my contact information on it. So let me get that up for you. Give me a second. Sorry, give me a second. All right. I'm going to share my screen again so that you guys can see the slide. It is this one. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my contact information is there. I'd be more than happy to hear from any of you. I would love that. And that last picture on top is actually my adoptive family meeting my biological family.
That's
It's a great
great.
picture.
What a great picture. Yay.
So good.
Great presentation. Loved
Yeah.
it.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Do we have any last minute questions before we close? Oh. Okay, Pam, you go ahead and.
If I can get, now I gotta go to my, let's see if I can get,
Class too, like the first 10 minutes, I'm like, admit, and I don't know what I'm saying and I get lost. Like,
well, there's something that Jen does to ours. There's a security setting and it just will let everyone in. You don't have to keep hitting admit. And I don't,
oh,
yeah, and I don't know what it is, but she does it. And I asked her and she told me and I couldn't find it. And I was like, oh, well, we'll just hit admit.
Like I said,
We'll just
Pam
keep,
and I are a little technology challenged.
well, I
You're
mean,
doing a lot better though, I think.
well, we're pretty good now, but like, like some things are a little bit of a challenge, but it was great. It was great. I
Well,
think
you enjoy your evening.
yes,
thank you for giving me the opportunity. It was great.
it was
Oh, you're
good. I
welcome.
enjoyed it.
Glad to have your family here too. That was great. Well, you
Yes.
stay warm and we will
right,
talk to you
thank you.
later.
All
Okay.
right.
Good
Good night,
night.
guys.
Night, Pammy. I'll talk to
Good
you
night.
tomorrow.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Paige. Bye, Paige.